So, hey, thank you, everyone. Hello, and welcome to today's session. Hope everyone is feeling simply fantastic. I'm not too sure from which part of the world you're joining us, but it's beautiful and sunny today in downtown Montreal, and actually 25 degrees in my room, so it feels great. I just want to know, like here by a show of hands or however you want to say using the chat, did anyone watch global news yesterday? And it's not too important anyways. I just wanted to say that I saw and heard about that Canada is one of the best places around the world when looking for children's book. And today you'll see a good example why. So since we're going to be talking about a special book called Trailblazers, the Black Pioneers Who Have Shaped Canada. And we are honored to have none other than the creators of this much needed book. So before we begin, I just wanted to say that we at CATS, also known as the Career Advising and Transition Services of McGill School of Continuing Studies, want to thank you for taking the time for being here with us today. And I'll ask my dear colleagues if they want to take a minute to say hi.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
I think we also have our Dean Carolla, if you want to say hi. Well, she's in the chat. So
I'm trying. So hello, everyone. My camera is not working, so you get me incognito, but this is a fabulous program and idea, and I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, hey, I'm glad to have the whole team and the Dean here with us. So as you may have noticed, this session is being recorded and we're going to be sharing it with you on social after. And we strongly encourage everyone to share their thoughts, comment, questions in the chat until we open up for the Q&A period at the end. And while you're getting comfortable and while people continue to come in, I just want to warm up the chat with a simple question. So how did you first hear about Black culture? And who was the first icon that you heard about? Any type of variation of that question or answer is welcome. I just really want to get a sense of the room here. And yeah, I really also look forward to your answer because I have to be honest, for me, it wasn't something I really learned about in school when I was younger. And yeah, I'm happy that there's a book for this now. So I feel even more lucky about this book like this one. And I know it's going to help both kids and adults to learn what truly shaped the country we live in today and be even more proud of our heritage. So now, while you write your answers, Ray Charles, fantastic. Yeah, so feel free to write in the chat all along with the session. For now, I'm going to jump right in and introduce our guest speakers. So hello, Tiyahna, and hello, Meryl. How are you feeling today?
Feeling good. I'm feeling good.
Fantastic. Okay, so do I. And I'm going to start with you, Tiyahna Ridley-Padmore. So you're born in Montreal, currently living in Toronto, and as a lifelong bookworm and the author of Trailblazer and much, much more. I want to know, Tiyahna, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself or whatever is most natural to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Montreal, Longueuil, Rive-Sud, but you know, the metro lines connect. And currently I work as a policy advisor in social inclusion for a non-governmental organization. I also work as an equity and inclusion strategist. So I'm involved in a number of really, really cool and exciting projects right now. Our Minister of International Development, Karina Gould, just launched an inaugural Refugee Education Council to help bring the voices of people with lived experience from around the world into Canada's global decision-making. So I'm helping to lead that project with World Vision Canada. I'm also part of Cooperation Canada's anti-racism task force as the co-lead. So helping to make international development anti-racist and, you know, overcoming that white saviorial piece. And I write books. So Trailblazers came out in November 2020. So that's been keeping me quite busy as well. So lots of different things on the go.
Okay, well, we definitely feel even more lucky to have you for the full hour and a half to see how busy you are and how passionate. Thank you so much for joining us, Tiyahna. And
Happy to be here.
Okay, great. And now for now Meryl. So Meryl Royce, passionate, self-taught artist in Ottawa and the illustrator of Trailblazer. I guess you must see me coming. I would love to know a little bit more about yourself and what other things you're doing in terms of career or community involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Meryl Royce Demamusa. I am the illustrator for Trailblazers. I have a background, formal education background in something completely unrelated to art. So I have a degree in biochemistry and a master's in environmental sciences. I work at Health Canada currently. My passion is art, and it's always been on the side. It's always accompanied my journey. So I also have projects on the side where I go by my art pseudonym Royce, and I have the Royce Project, which is my online personality and alias. And essentially, I've always kept art with me through school, through after school, and everything like that. And had the fortune of connecting with Tiyahna about over 2 years ago now. And, you know, she shared her story, and it was intriguing. I wanted to join in and contribute. But we'll speak to that a little bit afterwards. But essentially, our connection allowed us to form this book, even though I was doing it on the side. It was a passion project that was happening while I was, you know, going through life and work and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm a combination of, you know, formal scientific background and artistic skills, and it all worked out for this project, which brought us here today. And I saw that my sister is in the chat. So hey Karen, and happy to be here.
Cool. Hey, thank you so much for coming. And yeah, we're happy that you two guys met and that you're sharing with us your passion project today. So I'll let you guys take over and start the reading.
Sure, fantastic. Thank you so much. So it's Black History Month, which is an interesting and exciting time. I think it's a necessary time, but the fact that it's necessary is a little bit, it's interesting and a little bit unsettling. So, you know, we have books, and then we have Black books, and we have movies, and then we have Black movies, and we have history, and then we have Black history. And so I think that's really interesting. And, you know, when we start to deconstruct it and look at what the reason behind that divide is, I mean, we can obviously point to segregation, and of course that's a piece of it. We can point to marginalization, and of course that's a piece of it. But I would argue that a big piece of it is also about safe spaces, and it's about creating safe spaces where people belong and where they feel accepted and respected and safe. And I'm not just referring to physical safety, although as we've seen in the case of Clive Mensa, DeAndre Campbell, that's still an ongoing and really critical issue in a Canadian context. But I'm talking about safety to feel like your nervous system is not going to constantly being attacked, safety to feel like you belong, like you've contributed, like you have value and are worthy. And I think in a Canadian context, we've largely been missing that for a very long time. There aren't very many places where Black people in Canada feel safe. So Blackness in Canada has existed for over 400 years, starting with Matthew da Costa in the 16th century. The first 206 years, we had enslavement. The next 149 years, we had legal segregation and racial segregation. And it's only been for the past 39 years that segregation has ended in a Canadian context. And still then we faced underrepresentation in leadership, lower wages, overrepresentation in incarceration, and punitive action, discrimination, stigmatization. So when people say that Canada as a safe haven or a promised land, I don't see it. I ask where and when. So this project, Trailblazers, really started as a way of creating a safe space, as a way of making sure that our stories were represented, that our stories weren't forgotten, that the people who helped shape and build Canada were credited and honored and remembered, and that the future generations of Black Canadians that would come to be would grow up knowing where they came from, knowing their value, and knowing the incredible people that helped create space and create safe spaces for them. And so Trailblazers is a love letter. It's a learning resource. It's an anthology of stories. It's a children's book that features over 40 incredible Black change makers throughout Canada's history, starting all the way in the 16th century with Matthew da Costa to present day's Michael Jean. Each short story is written in a rhyming poem form to help keep the stories interesting and entertaining. Each short story is accompanied by beautiful, beautiful illustrations that my friend Meryl Royce did. And really, it helps provide a roadmap to safety in Canada. It helps celebrate Black Canadian history. It helps shed light on existing and the legacy of inequality, and inspire a future generation of young trailblazers. So I want to start off by reading the intro poem. Dear reader, Canada didn't just let you in, you actually helped to build it. Indigenous peoples cared for their land, and many others filled it. This book is a way to express our thanks and unwavering admiration for the pioneers who paved the way and changed the entire nation. These leaders are beacons of freedom, embodying strength through adversity. They offer a testament to the breadth of Canada's rich diversity. This is the story of a few heroes who have remained unsung, but there are so many, many more than these. This story has just begun. From activists, athletes, and artists to community leaders and teachers, I hope in this book you can see yourself and find some common features. And when it's your turn to make your mark, glass ceilings you will shatter, because you are brave and special and true, and especially because you matter.
Right, so thank you, Tiyahna, for introducing Trailblazers. What I'm gonna do now is speak a little bit to the background of how we came to this day, our story in terms of what we went through to get this book published, and how we connected in the beginning. So Tiyahna and I connected about, I don't remember exactly when, but I know it was about over 2 years ago. Tiyahna had made a call out because she was looking for someone that could help illustrate this idea and concept that she had been working on for a very long time. And it was, the beginning steps of Trailblazers. Tiyahna has been writing in poem form her whole life, and she wanted to bring these stories to the forefront. So she made this call out, and a mutual friend of ours put us in contact. At the beginning, Tiyahna and I spoke. She introduced this idea to me, and I believed in the idea, and I decided that I wanted to be a part of the story and see where it could take us. So we worked for several months on choosing the Trailblazers. I had to do a lot of research on what she was introducing to me in terms of these people's stories, what they may have looked like, and the challenges around illustrating them in a style that was made for children. And so throughout that process, there was a learning to be done. We connected often, and we finally came up with a product that we felt was ready to be brought to the world. So Tiyahna led the charge in seeking out publishers in Canada to take on our book and put these stories out there. So I think it was over the course of 6 to 8 months, she sent out the book to different publishers and didn't exactly hear anything back from anybody. I think one publisher showed interest, but in the publishing realm, in the publishing world, publishers tend to be and hold the position of gatekeepers. So although they showed interest in the book, they also felt that they needed to transform the book into their vision and not exactly our vision. So that experience was very disempowering in the sense that we felt that we had an important project that we wanted to put out, but the people who have the power to put it to release it to Canada and the world wanted to modify it. Our visions didn't align. So we had to deal with that for a little bit. And that brought us into 2020, still wondering where this project will go. And 2020 being one of the most important years in my lifetime, I'm sure in everybody's lifetime with the pandemic and everything that happened that year, we come to the point in 2020 where there was the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis in the States, where it created a ripple in the world to see this man lose his life at the hands of police and spark a conversation that I guess this generation needed in terms of discrimination towards Black people and at the same time, lack of representation in just industries and in the workforce and publications and books. And what do you know, at the same time that this conversation is happening, there seems to be a little bit more interest from publishers who had previously not responded to the call outs for publishing this book, right? So that let us know a little something about what we were dealing with in terms of, you know, that gatekeeper word I spoke to earlier. And it was just interesting to see that they were coming out at the time that the conversation was being had around, Black people and the importance of inclusion and diversity and et cetera. So that moment also empowered us in the sense that we felt that it was appropriate for us to self-publish, or at least explore the option of self-publishing and lean on our community to support us to get this book out there. So I think it was in the month of June, July, we decided that we were going to start a Kickstarter for Trailblazers and really put it out there and utilize the conversation that was happening in order to, you know, shine light on this project that we had been working on for the previous 2 years. So we put the Kickstarter out there with a target of $10,000. We shared it on all our social medias. We shared it with our communities, and it ballooned. Honestly, the response was overwhelmingly positive. We had a target of $10,000 that we reached in the first 10 hours of the day we launched the Kickstarter, which was extremely reassuring for us. And it was honestly an overwhelming experience to see that our community was supporting our project. It was reassuring to know that we had been working on something that people felt was valuable and that there was a need for something like this in Canadian literature, especially for young people, to get introduced to these kind of stories and introduce, you know, everybody to these over 40 people who have made a significant impact on Canadian history and Canadian Black history. So we launched the Kickstarter. We met the goal of $10,000 in 10 hours. And we just watched the Kickstarter grow for the next 3 months until September. So at the end of it all, we raised over $47,000 for this Kickstarter. And we were ready to take on the task of publishing this book ourselves and getting it out there, seeing that there was an interest, seeing that we were getting news coverage for this initiative, seeing that people were being fully engaged and sharing the story, and really excited that we were bringing this product to them. So it was definitely reassuring. At the same time that this was happening, we were contacted by Indigo Press, which is a subsidiary of Chapters in Indigo. We had begun a conversation about what a publication would look like with them. I have to say that Indigo approached the situation very openly and allowed for an environment where we were able to utilize their platform to get this book out there while keeping what was valuable to us in the book in terms of the creative rights, the words, the layout, the way that we wanted the book to look is the way that you guys received it. and Indigo Press was able to empower us in that sense, and we reached terms that were favorable for both sides. So that's essentially the story for Kickstarter. We published on November 10th, 2020. And that date is in my calendar now forever. And honestly, the response has been more than positive. When we launched, a lot of conversation was being had around the importance of this book. A few months later, now we are here in February for Black History Month, and that response is, I don't know, it's multiplying. We're getting even more attention for this conversation. People are happy that this resource is available to them. So that's the story behind Trailblazers, from its conception to its publication. And it's been a wonderful experience for the two of us.
Thank you, Royce. Yes, it was a crazy, crazy, crazy experience, but I think it all worked out exactly as it needed to. There are one of the biggest, I think, takeaways and rewarding pieces is definitely the messages that we get from parents, from adults, from teachers, from educators, just talking about how impactful this book is to them. And that's not something that I had anticipated. When I started working on this book and when Royce was brought onto this project, it was very much a passion project and something that we knew we needed to do for ourselves, to unlearn and to learn our history and to take initiative and be proactive in teaching us what's important and things that have been chronically removed from our history books. So that was definitely a really, really rewarding piece. And then the second piece is also knowing that these incredible and powerful stories are being shared and being known. So I'm going to take the next couple of minutes to share a couple of stories with you. I'll start off with Miss Maddie Mays. And Miss Maddie Mays is one of the lesser known trailblazers featured in the book. So a lot of the information from her story was dug up from old news articles, from the library and archives. I was contacted by her family members as well. So definitely one of the lesser known trailblazers that I'm so excited to share with you. So Maddie was taken from her mom when she was 4 years old. She'd been born into slavery, and as a child, she was sold. When she got a little older and she finally was free, she vowed to give her kids a home where they could just be. In 1910, she moved to Saskatchewan, to be precise. And although it was a new start, it was far from paradise. See, there weren't that many places where Black folk felt included. So Maddie founded a colony that was uplifting and secluded. The colony was Shiloh, and they made it all their own. 12 Black families grew to 50 in one town they called home. There, Maddie raised 13 kids and delivered lots of others. She was the local midwife, helping babies and their mothers. Miss Maddie created a haven where people could feel protected. The town's beloved matriarch. She was loved and well respected. So in a context where during the time, the government of Saskatchewan actually wasn't allowing Black people to come to the province because they said that the conditions weren't favorable for Negroes, that Black people couldn't survive in the weather conditions, and it very much was not a safe space. Maddie came anyways, and she created an entire community where Black people could feel safe at the time.
And I'll speak a little bit to the illustration style for Maddie Mays. I'm just gonna pull up the page so you guys can see how she was drawn in the book. Because a lot of thought went into the illustration process as well to match the stories. So yeah, so you can see Maddie Mays. The important thing here was to demonstrate her characteristics as a caretaker and a medical professional. So I approached this illustration with warmth in mind. And I wanted to make sure that her face was inviting to the reader. You could you could feel and sense that she was a caring person. The outfit is more or less captured from images that were available for Maddie Mays, but I chose colors that were also, inviting, that were nice to see. And in the background, you can see that there are medical related icons to pretty much accompany the story and the image of Maddie Meza. And this kind of thought process went on throughout the book. So at the same time, you know, there are other trailblazers who had who made marking differences in our history. One of them is related to the fact that, you know, in Canada, jobs for Black people were previously always difficult to obtain. And once certain jobs were obtained, the Black people who had them still had to experience, you know, challenges and difficulties. And this brings us to the next trailblazer that we're going to talk about, which is Albert Jackson. Albert Jackson is the first Black mailman to be in Canada. And I'll just show you his image quickly to speak to him. You might recognize him these days from some of the stamps that are available at the post office. Albert Jackson has made it onto the stamps, and he's being recognized today as the first Black mailman in Canada. The approach here was to draw him as well as represented as his images are. There are a few images of Albert Jackson available on Google. The most challenging part of this illustration was drawing his uniform, which before the stamp came out, when I sketched this uniform, was very difficult to find a colored image of a postman or mailman uniform in Canada from over 100 years ago. And that was, you know, part of the research that I had to do to get this image out. And so now he's being well represented in our history, and in his role, the significant role as the first Black mailman is also being represented. So Tiyahna will speak a little bit more about that.
Albert Jackson. Albert Jackson was born into slavery, and his older brothers were sold. So his family fled north to find freedom, no idea what the future would hold. When young Albert had finished his studies, he wanted to carry the mail. And though he was hired to do that, white coworkers caused him to fail. On his first day, they just wouldn't train him simply because he was Black. How absurd that the color of skin was a reason to hold someone back. The press quickly picked up the story, and public opinion divided. While some thought he shouldn't deliver, others remained undecided. But Albert refused to accept this, and his peers organized their support. They demanded investigation. The Prime Minister got a report. The public pressure paid off, and a decision was finally made. Albert became a mail carrier, and for 36 years he stayed. So that's Albert Jackson. All right, we'll read you one last one and then open it up for the Q&A. So the last person that I'm gonna read is Miss Jean Augustine. And Miss Jean Augustine came to Canada from Grenada as part of a program, a government program that was going on, where they were bringing Black women into the country to care for the children of white families as nannies, as domestic workers. And I don't think whoever signed those, you know, government papers allowing that program to happen did not anticipate for Jean Augustine to become Canada's very first Black woman elected to Parliament. So she was breaking glass ceilings in all directions. Jean Augustine was raised in Grenada's Happy Hill. She was studious, charismatic, and driven by her will. As women entered the workforce and started their career, Canada needed nannies for the children these women would bear. The West Indian Domestic Scheme was introduced with some conditions. Only the healthy, single, and young could come for these positions. The scheme was far from perfect, but Jean saw it as a door. Though she started as a nanny, she made it something more. See, not that long ago, in 1993, Jean made her mark as Canada's first female Black MP, elected again and again, 4 times to be exact. Jean moved Canadians forward with each and every act. Jean helped unite the nation with incredible ambition. She taught us to move forward through historical recognition. So this is Miss Jean Augustine, and she is still actively engaged in preserving and making the efforts to preserve undertold parts of Canada's history.
Yeah, and Jean Augustine is also, she can be thanked for bringing Black History Month in February in Canada. She was an advocate for making sure that that was well represented and brought to the Canadian, brought in Canada. And she is a strong advocate for preserving and ensuring that the undertold or lesser told stories of Black Canadian history are brought to the forefront. So, Jean Augustine is alive today and still doing incredible work in ensuring that the Black stories are being told in Canada. And right now, that's the stories that we read from the book. That's the live reading. I want to thank everybody for listening to the stories, and we're happy to engage with everybody right now for the rest of the time.
Thank you so much, Tiyahna and Meryl. That was just exceptional to hear the stories read out loud, to hear where you drew your inspiration in order to create the illustrations. As a new mother, and especially having a mixed race child, as a Black woman, it has become increasingly important to have representation in my daughter's life. So for the parents out there, thank you so much for this incredible love letter, as you put it. It really does justice to the icons you've showcased in your book, and it also supports parents like myself and many others out there as our children grow to teach them about those that came before them, and especially those that look like their mama in a positive light. So thank you so much. We're gonna open up questions. If you have questions for Tiyahna and Meryl, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to make sure that they're answered. To get things started, we'll start with Tiyahna. You, as a passion project, when you were getting started, did you ever have moments of doubt? And how did you stay motivated throughout the process?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I had started writing this book for myself. And at the time I was, doing my master's degree and working full time. So it really was, it was a side project. It was my own journey of learning and unlearning and discovering more about the pieces of history that I hadn't been exposed to. There wasn't an end goal. So I had never, I wasn't writing this for other people. I wasn't writing this for any other reason than to learn. So I was engaged throughout. I was encouraged throughout. I was angry throughout, and inspired throughout. I think the time at which I became discouraged was really once we started sending it out to publishers and the reaction that we received, because we had worked so hard in this book and we thought it was so great and we thought these stories were so great, and we were like, well, why haven't we heard about these stories? Everybody should know these stories. And then to receive such a bleak reaction from publishers, where at first they weren't responding to us, and then or they wanted to change everything, and they very much wanted to make they wanted to share these Black stories, but they wanted them to be shared from very much a white voice. And then for publishers to then come back to us and suddenly be interested once globally people were talking about race and racism, I found it to be very disheartening and disempowering. But the Kickstarter really changed that around, and just having the support and the overwhelming support and validation from the community lifted my spirits right back up.
Thank you. I just want to say I adore this book. This is, Valerie is the one who told me about it. What I love is the packaging of history in really art and poetry. I've never seen anything like that, and I love it. Now, I wonder if this was written for children, but were you surprised by I love it as an adult. I love reading this. So were you surprised about the reaction that adults had to this book? And did you think that might happen, or was it really aimed at children?
Honestly, I wrote the book for myself. So I imagine that other people that, you know, were within my demographic would be interested. It just so happened that, you know, once I had started mapping it out, and once I had started writing the poems, that's when I connected with Royce and said, hey, like this, you know, if we add some pictures, this could be a really great learning tool, recognizing that there is a huge disparity in the history books that our children are being exposed to in school. So I really, you know, it's marketed as a children's book, but I really do think that these stories are universal, the framing is universal, and that everybody really should be engaging with the stories.
Yeah, absolutely. It's phenomenal. And I wanted to follow up with a question about just that you're talking about, if we could call it the whitewashing of history, certainly in Canada. So how do you think regular people, regular citizens can do to change that fact and to make our history more representative of the facts that it's taught in school? What is it that any of us can do to make that happen? Because I certainly did learn about Black history, very little about Indigenous history. I mean, you know, it's so interesting to grow up after and realize they're not just white men in the world after you've gone through, you know, history, certainly in elementary school.
Yeah, I think there's not one single thing that needs to be done. I think at a systemic level, there's a lot of changes that need to be done. So even right now, the fact that we're celebrating Black History Month in February is fantastic. It's important, but the fact that Black history is relegated to 1 month out of a year, and then what happens for the rest of the 11 months throughout the year, right? It's relegated to one module when Black history is Canadian history, right? And so it really needs to be integrated, not just Black history, but just we need to, you know, our curriculums and our mainstream narratives need to be more inclusive of diverse voices, of diverse stories, of diverse approaches to doing things. And then I would say at an individual level, we need to make a concerted and intentional effort to be anti-racist in the things that we're doing. So in Canada, in December 2019, Global News found that 49% of Canadians didn't think that race or racism was an ongoing issue in Canada, that it wasn't important. And so Canada has very much adopted a colorblind perspective to how we approach each other, how we approach institutions. So one that, you know, believes in equality on a surface level and believes that everybody should be treated equally without actually recognizing the way that people are different and the way that that those differences are important to see in order to see the inequality that has shaped experiences, and then to make intentional efforts to reconcile and to address those gaps. And so I really think that it's important that as individuals, we adopt an anti-racist approach in everything that we do. That requires reflecting on our own privilege, reflecting on our own experiences, and recognizing the differences in others and how that should be approached.
Thank you. And really congratulations to both of you. Just wonderful.
Thank you.
It really resonates with me to say that Black History Month should not be relegated just to 1 month. It is Canadian history, it is world history. And I always find it so interesting how it's only during the month of February that we keep uncovering all of these great stories and hearing about people who have been here and they've lived and they've contributed to society, and yet we were never aware of their stories before. How did you go about selecting which stories to showcase in the book?
Sorry, I feel like, Royce, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so the selection of the Trailblazers was really about picking stories that properly represented the diversity within Black people as well. So Tiyahna made sure to pick people who had important stories from different times in Canada's Black history, who had important stories, people who had important stories from different Black backgrounds. So you don't just get exposed to people who are from Canada, you get exposed to people who passed through Canada, who came to Canada and made an impact on the history there. We all, there was also a focus on making sure to pick people who represented different regions of Canada. So throughout the book, you travel from West to East Canada, from northern to southern Canada. You travel through Canada, through the book, through its history. So there was a conscious effort to make sure that there was a representation within the diversity of Black people in Canada, from their backgrounds to the way they look, to their genders, to their orientations. You get a little bit of everything in the book as much as possible in those 40 characters. And it was very carefully studied, researched, and written for the reader to also highlight those differences between each individual, to highlight these backgrounds, to highlight where people come from, their professions, to highlight, to really show the reader that, you know, Black people are not a monolith. There is diversity in Blackness, and there is there are incredible stories, but there's also relation. You can relate to these stories. There's a familiar aspect to the book, I find, when you read it. So, you know, these things were carefully thought out for the selection of these 40 Trailblazers. And, you know, there are a large number of stories that are out there to tell, and the selection process was difficult in terms of narrowing it down to this number. Tiyahna can tell you that she studied over, I think it was like 300 people, definitely over 100 people. 300 might be the real number, but, you know, to go through all that and to narrow it down to these ones was done very carefully. And we wanted to make sure that the reader's curiosity was sparked enough to continue the work of doing this kind of research for themselves once they read these stories, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wonderful. Royce and Tiyahna, do you see yourselves working together again to do a similar, or a different project or something? But it seems like such a wonderful partnership. Maybe, and even talk about how the partnership was and how you learned from each other through this process. But do you see yourselves working together again in this capacity?
You guys
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
If Royce wants to, I don't know. I'm tough to work with.
No, honestly, I think, the formation of this book was very organic, you know. Once I'll say my vision aligned with Tiyahna's vision, everything else from there was really about, okay, how do we make this happen, right? And I think on a working level, that could definitely happen again, right? It's a matter of having that conversation and seeing how we can do it another time. Will it be a sequel? I don't know. Will it be a different story? But definitely the partnership is very strong. I believe that we are destined to work together again on another book.
So we're also translating the book right now to French. So that will be hopefully available soon, because we do want to make sure that these stories are available to the French diaspora. I'm currently working on two other projects. So another children's book that Royce is going to be looped in on soon, and then an adult a nonfiction as well.
Thank you so much. And that actually answers Carola's question in the chat. We were curious about your future plans and what you have in the works. So I think it's great that the book is being translated into French. You've got another buyer right here. I think it's incredible to tell these stories in both languages. So thank you for that. We have quite a few questions in the chat, and Yvonne would like to ask a question directly. Yvonne, would you like to unmute yourself?
Thanks. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join earlier, and then I have to cut out for another meeting, but I really wanted to make time and space for your project. I thought the reading was beautiful, and I just wanted to know, like, this idea of Black lives taking up space in the public sphere, you know, this story about the postman, for example. I think that that's really, really important. And the way that Royce was talking about bringing in sort of archives and pictures and kind of digging deep into the stories of families and stuff. It picks up a little bit on some of the stuff that some of the questions others have raised about future projects, but I wonder if there's some other space where images or recordings or sketches, like the initial sketches, could be given, that people could have access to that to show some of the artistic process and the decisions that you've made, and whether that could be another channel for people to kind of access these stories and also to put in maybe their own recordings or to add a little bit more to add a little bit more color to what you've also produced.
Wow, that's an incredible idea. I can't believe you just came up with that on the spot. That's a really, really great idea. Something that I don't think we've discussed or considered. Definitely something that we can talk more about. We do have a website right now. It's www.blacktrailblazers.ca that we've just been so swamped with getting things out and you know, since the Kickstarter launch, that we haven't had time to really invest in it the way that we would want to. So I think once things settle down, I do want to help make that website into more of a community space where, you know, we're sharing resources, where people can share. As for sharing some of the preliminary pieces, the challenge with being signed to a publisher is the copyright bits and who owns some of that work. So that's something that we would have to look into a little bit more. But I really appreciate the thinking, and you're definitely sparking some creative thoughts in me. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you. There's another question is there going to be an audiobook? Is that something you've considered? And this is a question from the chat from Craig.
So that's another piece that would have to be Indigo that would take that on because of the copyright. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We talked about whether or not we would make the book digital. I don't think we talked about an audiobook. I think there's something quite beautiful about, you know, children reading these stories themselves and parents reading to them and you know, teachers reading it out loud. But then again, from an accessibility perspective, an audiobook might be good. So it's another consideration that I think we'll have to think about.
Yeah, because it's funny, I loved reading it, and having you read it is a completely different experience too. So it'd be nice to have it in different, you know, in different iterations. Because I totally see what you're saying about people sharing the reading of it together. But hearing you read it was just a whole other. It added a whole new dimension to it. It was really beautiful. Actually, and I'm sure people would agree, because I could see the reactions that people had in the audio today was breathtaking, says Craig. Yeah, my thought. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we put ourselves in a position where these kind of ideas and discussions wouldn't, like, there's the conversation is had, we put ourselves in a place where possibility is there, you know. It's just a matter of having that discussion between the two of us and with the publisher and seeing how that could happen. So we're not in a situation where we know that those things are off the table, right? So it's just a matter of having that discussion, seeing the interest, and, you know, attending to those kind of needs from the public as well.
Absolutely.
Carola has her hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself, Carola?
Thank you. I have actually been desperately looking for the name, but there was a young woman I was listening to who I believe might actually have been a McGill student who had created a platform, a website to archive particularly Quebec Black history. And she was featured last year in some interesting work. But I wonder whether you have also thought about, you mentioned that you're sort of overwhelmed with interests and requests on your own website, but and Yvonne, my colleague Yvonne, had this wonderful idea. I wonder to what extent you are thinking about networking with other like-minded resources, individuals, projects that are out there. Tiyahna, you mentioned that you were doing a little bit of that already, but it seems to me that part of the power of the story and the work is this ability to amplify and network and leverage beyond the two of you and beyond the networks that each of you have as creative people. And, you know, what can we as universities, what can we do and as educators to help you amplify that message?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the success of this book is a testament to our collective power. It's a testament to our community engagement, the power of our community. It really, you know, Royce and I are maybe the face of this book, but we played a very, you know, I would say minor role in its success. It really is the community that's taken over. We've gotten a lot of great requests. We have been collaborating with other creators, with other Black researchers in this area, and are constantly looking for opportunities on how to further amplify these stories in this work. For McGill, I'd have to give it some more specific thought, but I think that creating space is definitely a big piece. So creating space where diverse voices can continue to engage with your students, such as this space right now that we've been invited in, creating opportunities for diverse voices to shape, you know, curriculums and to shape the learning that's being done as well. I think that's really important. So I'll give it a little bit more thought and maybe email you on the side, but I think it's important for all pieces of our community to come together towards this collective and shared goal of preserving and amplifying these stories and moving us towards more equitable outcomes.
Just to add just a little bit to that, I think you know, it's important to utilize the tools that have become more familiar to us these days. So I think that even though we're all at home, we're all more interconnected than ever before, thanks to things like Zoom and these kind of conferences. So, you know, when asking what the university can do is making yourselves available for these kind of events that we're hosting today, and making it open to the public and sparking that discussion on a wider basis, using the tools that we have, would be an important addition to making sure that we stay interconnected and have these kind of conversations and stuff like that. Because I think being able to talk to people from Montreal from my house is much more interesting than having to travel there, right? So, and it's the possibilities are limitless at this point. We haven't had the opportunity to utilize these kind of tools for interconnectedness before. And I think there's power in that as well. So.
Thank you. And I just put in the chat, anyone, please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. We're more than happy to take your question, or you can put your question in the chat. In the interim, I was wondering, and this is a question for both of you, is there a piece of feedback from anyone or anything that surprised you? Any kind of feedback on the book?
Sorry, go ahead, Royce.
Yeah, in terms of feedback, I think the response has, for the most part, has been this happiness that we've actually produced this kind of work. I've seen feedback from parents, teachers, stuff like that, thinking, you know, this is a really great, like, this is a needed resource. You know, we didn't have this growing up. That's what a lot of adults say. Like, people say we are learning so much about these interesting characters that I just had no exposure to before. And that kind of feedback really speaks to, you know, what I mentioned earlier, the selection process and the importance of telling these stories. And it's just reaffirming that Tiyahna's research in these 40 plus Trailblazers is being received so positively, right? From the art perspective, I think that the feedback is, it just coupled, there's a visual coupled to the stories as well, which I think people find, you know, interesting in its own way. So the feedback has more or less been positive. There's been more requests for, is there a part 2? Is there a French version of this? You know, like it lets us know that the work that we've done with this book has been well received and it's important, and there's an appetite for it. So I think that's been the majority of the feedback. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. If I had to say the thing that surprised me the most, so in talking to publishers, I think one of the biggest concerns that they had was, that Canada doesn't have a big Black market. There aren't very many there aren't as big of a Black population in a Canadian context as there is maybe in the United States. So many of them might have been hesitant to create, this Black book that preserves Black stories and celebrates, Black contributions to Canadian history. But what we're actually finding is that this book is for everybody, and everybody is engaging with these stories, and everybody that's reading it most people are recognizing the value of these stories. And so this book isn't just for Black Canadians. This book is for Canadians. It's for everybody. And so I've been really, really taken by how many allies across different races, across different ethnicities have been championing this project, have been so excited to share it with their networks, and so excited to learn more and to celebrate these stories, and how it's really become a piece of Canadian work. And that's been really, really affirming.
Wonderful.
Absolutely incredible. Speaking of some of the creativity, Meryl, at what point did you discover you had this talent, and how have you nurtured it on the side in parallel with your career?
I've been drawing since I was a little kid. Probably since the age of 4 or 5. I picked up a pencil and a pen and I sketched on paper, and it's literally been that ever since. So growing up, I spent a lot of time looking at books, illustration books, mostly on the subjects of, I used to draw cars a lot. I used to draw space-related things a lot. I had this big interest for astronomy and stuff like that. I really wanted to know what was out there in the universe. I watched a lot of cartoons, which a lot of kids do, but I always watched different cartoons to get an idea of what different drawing styles were like. And then I would go back to my room and sketch that out, draw that out, learn from it, etc. And that's always been a part of me. You'd go into my room as a child and you'd see drawings on line paper that I did, but I would hang them on the wall anyways. And drawings of just random things that I had interest in, and ranging from cartoons to real life things. And it's always been something that I kept with me. Like right now, if you look inside my house, you can see illustrations on my wall that I've done recently. I'm wearing a t-shirt with an illustration of mine. And it's just always been a part of my life. There was a point in university where my focus had shifted away from illustration and more on sciences. I didn't see a future with illustrations at that point. I thought that, it's nice to do at home. It's nice to sketch and draw things, but I need to focus on school. I'm investing money in my sciences, and that's what's going to reward me in the future. But thanks to social media, which I was introduced to about 2012, 2013, I found a new community of artists there, and specifically Black artists, which got me back into drawing. But also reassured me that Black art is important, and there's an appetite for it there, something that wasn't really visible growing up for me. So when I say that this book is, I get the response from parents that they didn't have these tools growing up. Neither did I. I didn't have a lot of books with Black characters in them. And some of the books that I read growing up that did have Black characters had mostly misrepresentation to even racist representations in them. So, I want to make sure that this book highlights the positive in Black art. So social media got me back into art. it was reassuring to see that there were a lot of Black artists out there and that I could draw subjects that looked like myself and receive a lot of positive feedback from that. And it introduced me to the digital realm of artistry, which ended up being super useful for this book. I created social media accounts related to, I created the Royce Project, which is my social media account where I just showcase my art, and that's actually where Tiyahna found me. So it was, you know, the perfect avenue. She saw some of the work that I had done, and that the style that I used in the book was the style that I had showcased, but previously, and that was used. You know, that was the foundation of the illustration approach for this book. So yeah, it's always been there. I work on it continuously. I've turned it into a side gig, and you know, this book is one of my you know, one of my proudest accomplishments was being a part of this book, and that's something that my passion produced more than my academic background. So there's definitely a balance in those two things that I'm proud of, and I'm gonna make sure to continue to produce art. I'm gonna continue to produce the art that I like, and just know that there's space for it out there in the world and in the public, and continue to, you know, make sure that there are projects like this are possible for not just myself, but for a lot of people. So yeah, that's to answer your question.
Thank you so much. And as an offshoot, there was a question about animation. Do you think that's like your next frontier creatively?
So animation is not something that I'm interested in per se, but the artwork that I do, I would love to see it as a foundation for potential animation projects. And like I said, we put ourselves in a position where these kind of conversations are possible. So if ever that were to be the case for, let's say, Trailblazers, I would be happy to be a part of the direction for the animation. And in terms of my own personal art, I don't explore animation, but it's not off the table completely.
We're already seeing ways that other creators and Black leaders in this space are kind of making it their own. We have one connection with Cujo's Kid Zone, who is a personality for a preschool segment that teaches kids about different pieces of history and society and complicated topics, that used some of our illustrations and animated them and made them move to help engage a younger audience, which was just so cool and mind-blowing to see you know, some of these characters in motion.
I actually, speaking of the illustration, I was wondering how I find the cover just so striking, and then the back as well. So I was wondering, did this idea come about at the end, or does the publisher have any say in what excuse my ignorance on the publishing, on the field of publishing, but how did this come about? Because I think this is, to include all the faces on the cover is just, it's very striking and it's beautiful.
Yeah, so we went through a few iterations of, you know, layout and what things would look like, but for the cover specifically, it formed after the illustrations were completed. You know, myself, I found that I wanted to show the diversity in, like I used this before, diversity and Blackness on the cover. So by looking at it, you can see a sea of people. You can see so many different faces with so many different features. And you can see so many different, there's like a richness in the colors, you know, there's like a rainbow of Black skin. And I wanted to, you know, just demonstrate that in my approach for the cover. And, you know, I presented it to Tiyahna. She liked it a lot. And we said, you know, let's go with this. I think for the cover, the illustration was well, like, we had more discussions about what the title looked like than we did about what the pictures look like, right? So, yeah. And for the back cover, it was more or less, just a continuation of what the front cover looked like, right? So that's why you see the people's feet and stuff. And
Yeah.
It just was a rep. I wanted the reader to know that this book is full of stories, it's full of faces and stuff like that.
So this was the, oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So this is the cover. I see that somebody asked. So this is the cover of Trailblazers. And then this was the cover that we had initially had. So this is the one that was, I guess, approved by Indigo. And then this was the original. So some of the differences, obviously the cover is different, the title is different. So Indigo, they're experts in publishing, and they found that the red piece made it look more self-published. So we ultimately took that off. And then we also moved around some of the Trailblazers that were featured, just because I did want to. I found that there were some of the lighter skinned Trailblazers were featured more in the center, and I wanted to make sure that we were, centering some of the darker skinned Trailblazers, and that there was good representation in who was showcased and how. And then we also made the book a little bit smaller. And we made it smaller just because, it's written in poem form, and we found that there was a lot of blank space in the initial version. So just really, really minor changes, but I think it all came together in a way that worked out.
Yeah, and it's funny what Royce was saying about, it's definitely the cover that you look at it and it's going to be full of rich stories, just because, as you say, that you can see all the diversity in it. And I was really struck by the cover, and I'm one of those, I don't judge a book by cover, but it certainly gets my interest. So I think if that was your intention, it certainly worked for me. And you can just, it's alive, and you can just see this is going to be full of really interesting stories. So thank you for sharing how that came to be. And so sorry I interrupted you before. It was because we had a question to show the cover, which you did. So thank you.
As career advisors, and we work in the career development space, one of the things we always tell the students that we work with is that we're not unidimensional. We have different passions, we have different interests, and we can follow those passions simultaneously almost. What advice do you have for anyone else in the room if they have a passion project that they're too scared to start? Do you have any advice from both of you?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're pursuing your passion project for, right? And so I think that one of the big reasons why personally I was able to navigate, doing my master's, working full-time at a job that already stretches me very thin, and then also writing this book, is because I was writing this book because it excited me. It was a passion. It's something that I found joy in, and something that I found pleasure in. And so I wasn't writing it to, be featured on Indigo's website, and I wasn't writing it for to gain financially. I was really writing it because I wanted to, and because I felt called to. And so I think if it's a passion and it's something that you enjoy doing, then it shouldn't feel like work, and that it makes it a lot more manageable to do while pursuing other things simultaneously, because it is a little bit of a release, and it's different type of work. So I would say just do it. It doesn't matter when you do it. It doesn't matter timelines and what the outcome is, as long as you're doing it, you're enjoying doing it, and it's bringing value to your life.
I'll add a little bit to that. I think it's important. One thing I've been repeating lately is that passion can save you, in the sense that when it comes to Trailblazers or just illustration in general, passion, this art passion has literally brought me joy. It has opened doors that that I couldn't open otherwise, right? And I'm not talking simply about Trailblazers. Trailblazers has opened a number of doors, but before Trailblazers, my artwork, just by putting it out there on social media, opened doors in terms of, participating in exhibits, being reached out to collaborate with people, travel. I was able to go to England and participate in live art exhibits there, things that were not possible had I not pursued that passion, had I not been reinvigorated previously to jump back into artwork. So I think that whatever your passion is, it can literally save your life. If you do it out of joy, if you do it out of, if your heart's involved in it, the minute you put it out there, shouldn't matter what people say. As long as you believe in it, then you'll get some satisfaction out of it. Before we made the decision to self-publish Trailblazers, there were a lot of discussions about, will it work? What will the reception be? And then eventually it was just about just taking the leap of faith and seeing what happens, right? And it can feel like that for a lot of stuff, whether it's small projects or big projects. You just don't know what the reception will be. But if your heart's in it, the reception will be positive. Somebody will relate to it. Somebody will appreciate it. And it can open a door that you never knew was closed before. So, yeah.
It's also really scary. So I know, Royce, you've been doing this for a long time, but I've been writing since I was 6-7 years old. I would write stories and read them to my class. This was my very first time writing something and then sharing it publicly, and it felt very, very vulnerable, very, very scary to do. But ultimately, it goes back to what your motivations are, what's driving that passion. And ultimately I felt like the potential reward of having other people know this work and engage with this work and know these stories was more important than my fear.
I love that. So many great pieces of information in there. It's funny when or great advice, but sometimes that's what it is with passion, is wondering, ooh, what's the response going to be? And I love that, Royce, you said, that's not the focus. The focus is, if you do something with passion, you will get some positive response out of it. I love that. And I hope and I'm sure that helps people who are in this in the audience today. And before I get to Karen's question, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for engaging so much in the chat. There are a lot of resources. So if you haven't had your chat open, everyone, I just suggest before you leave that you take notes some of the incredible resources that people have been sharing. So thanks to everyone for that. And Karen, please go ahead with your question.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much, Tiyahna and Meryl, for sharing your insights. I've known about this book for a while, but I feel like this is the first time I've heard you both speak on it in such depth. So I have a question. I apologize if it was asked within that first hour. I was in between two meetings. But my question is around a call to action. So Meryl, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I was hosting a Black History Month event at my company. So we watched a piece of media on Canadian Black history, and then we discussed it as a group at my company. And there was an overwhelming sense for a call to action. Like, we now have this information that we didn't have previously. What can we do? What can we do? What can we do in our own lives? So Tiyahna, I really liked your comment about how you wrote this book for yourself, because even myself, when I read it, it was almost a children's book written for adults. It was really, really so you do read it and you do feel an overwhelming sense of wanting to learn more and wanting to do more. So my question for you all is, what is a call to action that you would suggest for different audiences? So this is a great book, obviously, for teachers and parents, but what about working professionals? What is something that you would suggest?
Yeah, that's a great question, Karen. Thank you. So at the end of Trailblazers, we do include a call to action. There's the 5 T's of trailblazing, and it's essentially meant to be a roadmap for young readers who are looking to blaze their own trails, who are looking to make a difference in the world. And it recognizes that different people bring different skills, talents, passions, and interests to the table. And each of those passions and diverse interests can be leveraged towards that collective common goal of making the world a better place. And so I think it's a matter, and I spoke to it a little bit earlier about being anti-racist. So recognizing and taking inventory of our own privilege, of our own experiences, of our own skills and talents and resources that we have access to, and how can those be leveraged to address the gaps and inequities. And I think that looks different from person to person. in Trailblazers, we see, you know, in the case of Portia White, how she was an incredible singer and was able to use her voice to make a big difference. We see Elijah McCoy, who was creative and an inventor and an engineer, and how he was able to bring innovation to make a difference, and so on and so forth. So when we look at like Black Lives Matter, and we look at these movements on creating more equitable outcomes for Black people, for marginalized racial groups, we see that it doesn't and shouldn't look the same way. So some people might go out to protests, some people might be advocating for greater inclusion within their workspaces, some people might be, you know, delivering workshops or writing books, or you know, there's so many different ways to make a difference, and it's just a matter of identifying what yours is, and then actually taking the initiative to learn about how to best do it in a way that's effective, because it is possible to do harm while trying to do good, and then actually doing it. I think that's the biggest thing, is actually doing it, and doing it in a way that's meaningful and not performative. Be anti-racist is my answer.
Just to add a tiny bit to that, because Tiyahna did such a good job at explaining your point. I think there's an aspect of it all where this kind of conversation needs to be more normalized, right? So the call to action is a great initiative. It's something that should be done. It's also important to continue these conversations on a regular basis throughout your day-to-day. You've learned about Trailblazers, and you've learned about these stories, and you may want to continue to tell everybody around you about these stories, so that the issues of what seems to be a minority population can become the issues or not the issues, but the stories of what seems to be a minority can be the stories of the majority at the same time. I always find that there is, like Tiyahna alluded to earlier, there's a focus on Black history like it's a minor part of Canadian history, but it's a major part of it, right? So I think continuing these conversations, having these conversations in the workplace, recognizing that, you know, lived experience for Black individuals is different than lived experience for white ones, and being able to have a comfortable conversation around that, and then later recognizing that something could be done in the workplace about that because of the conversations, because of the, you know, the interactions that we're having. It's important to use these kind of tools to remember that these stories are important. They should not be undertold. They should become a normal part of your conversations. And with that, it will generate, you know, an attitude of inclusion, like genuine inclusion, right? So that's what I'd like to see, because Black issues are not just Black issues. When you say call to action, sometimes it might seem like, oh, you're just trying to help this certain demographic, but really what we're doing is we're trying to help everybody, right? And by having these conversations about the history of Black people in Canada and making it more normal, I think it can lead to positive change in the long run, at the same time as responding to these calls to action and being anti-racist, and, you know, just making sure that everybody's well represented in the workplace, school, pretty much everywhere, you know, from, you know, it's obviously a deeper topic than I'd like to get into, but it's just like, just be a part of the conversation is essentially my message, you know. You've learned about this book, tell somebody that wouldn't know about these stories that you discovered this book, and let them read about it. Normalize these stories. So I think it's very important to be a part of the solution.
That was such a great question, Karen. Thank you so much for asking it. And thank you for your answers. Everything that you've both said resonates wholly with me, especially about being anti-racist. It's not for show. There needs to be concrete steps that are taken in order to change our current reality, and especially post George Floyd and all the other things that have been happening, I think a lot of companies and organizations kind of jumped on the bandwagon, but is there real change? Are we really putting things in place that are going to change our realities and give a little bit more equity and representation, not only just for Blacks, but people of color, the Indigenous issues that we face currently in Canada and the erasure of their stories as well. This is not just about Black and white. There's a lot of injustice, and I think normalizing these conversations, a lot of people get uncomfortable when we start talking about race issues or the injustice that we see. We're told not to be political, but it is important that we start speaking about this, and through sharing our stories and sharing lived experiences, we're going to start to see what can be done, as opposed to it being this mythical reality that is out of reach. So thank you so much for sharing that. Are there any last questions?
It's more of an observation, really. 1995, the House of Commons in Canada passed the Black History Month legislation. We're now 25 years on. It's a milestone in terms of what's been happening so far. I just wanted to say that. So.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. I didn't realize that.
And actually, there's questions on how do people get your book. So that was one of the last questions we have here. Is it on the Indigo website, or if you could give, where can people find the book and purchase it?
Yes, it's available through Indigo. It's available through Knowledge Bookstore, which is a Black-owned bookstore, as well as Octopus Books and another storybook shop.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And then Emily put the link for it right there in chapter, so directly to the book. Thank you to Emily.
Just want to thank you so much. Thank you, Tiyahna and Meryl Royce. Wow, what an incredible session. Thank you for sharing your treasure with us. You're both true trailblazers, doing something that hasn't been done before, and really sharing. Tiyahna, thanks for sharing such a vulnerable project with us, and for inviting us into your journey of learning and unlearning. Meryl Royce, as the illustrator, the care and research that you put behind the illustrations is such a testament to your work. You both have shared so many great takeaways. Meryl Royce, you mentioned passion can save you, and I love that. What a well-needed reminder of how and when to zone in on your passion wherever you are in your career and your life. So there's been so many amazing takeaways. Just a couple are, we all need to adopt an anti-racist approach in everything that we do, and identifying. I love when you mentioned identifying your own skills and privileges and how to use that to really make a difference in your own space, however and wherever that may be. What a great book. I just received it. I'm so excited to finish it. I know you said that let's take at the beginning of the book, you mentioned read each story and take your time. And I really am digesting each and every story. It's absolutely incredible. Thanks for teaching us about what inspiring Black stories look like in Canada. I can't believe I've never learned about these stories. And you've made such a conscious effort of making sure that there's true representation of Black stories, and people like you had mentioned Maddie Mays is just unbelievable. And so for amplifying those stories of unsung heroes and the research that you did to find these people is phenomenal. You're both inspirational for so many different reasons, and a real testament to when you have a project in mind, you need to make it happen, despite the challenges, despite the gatekeepers that stand in the way. So you've created this children's book that's way beyond a children's book. It sparked a conversation, a real call to action on a much wider scale. So thank you for making us think about, the roles that we can play in our own spaces, to make sure that history is being taught to future generations, and making sure that it's diverse and inclusive. So thank you. To all participants, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure everyone's feeling inspired and ready to work on a project that has been motivating you. Stay tuned for next week's final Black History Month celebratory event. It's going to be the panel discussion, Managing Your Career When Young, Gifted, and Black, on February 24th at 5:30. Yes, we'll see you then. Thank you so much for today's session. Thank you everyone for sharing these incredible resources. And thank you once again, Tiyahna and Meryl Royce.
Thank you.